Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition here of the Overtime podcast with Sparksy and Jared. I'm Jared Moore alongside Mike Sparks, and joining us this afternoon is Jim Rosenhaus, play-by-play broadcaster for the Cleveland Indians. And Jim, thank you for joining us first off.
You're welcome, Jared and Mike. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
So we're looking back on March 12th, March 13th, that time frame. You're out in Arizona broadcasting Indian spring training games. We're about halfway through spring training at that point, and you get a call, something like along those lines, saying spring training is done.
That's pretty much how it went down. I mean, we were actually getting ready to do a game that day, March the 12th. Kind of had a hunch something was coming because the night before was when Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz, they announced that he had the coronavirus and the NBA shut down. So we kind of figured that might mean the end of spring training at that point. It was kind of an odd week because we hadn't played much. We had a game on Monday, then an off day Tuesday, and then it rained back-to-back days. So it was just an odd week. I mean, just to see rain at all out in Arizona, and then to have them cancel spring training. And who knew at that point how long things would last. And obviously it's lasted more than a month now. But yeah, just a really odd day. And the next couple of days, I didn't leave till the Saturday. And boy, people got out of there in a hurry because everyone wanted to get back home and be with their families.
Rosey, what was kind of the mindset at that time with Tito and the club, and just when they heard that, and everybody really didn't know anything about what was going on? What was kind of that initial mindset when you talked to the guys?
Well, initially, Chris Antonetti and Tito had met with everybody after they had made the announcement, and the initial thought was that everyone would hang around. Player-wise, they were sending the staff home, so we were cleared to go home at that point, but they kind of thought maybe the players would stay there, and that's where they would kind of wait things out. But probably, I mean, I know officially it didn't happen until that following Monday where they shut the camps down, but the Indians started telling people, I think late Friday and Saturday, hey, make plans to get to somewhere safe, and this isn't going to happen where teams are going to work out at their spring training homes. It's just not. So they were kind of, I know some teams waited a little bit to see if maybe that would change, but I think the Indians just said, you know what, let's get everybody safe. And if they need to come back, they can deal with it then. But they wanted to make sure people had an opportunity to get home.
Now, looking back on this and with everything going on, what have you done in your free time here? I know we've done the simulated games, and the Indians are in the midst of a 4-game losing streak right now. That's not looking good, Rosey, I'm telling you.
Spoiler alert, I already did today. It's a 5-game streak now. So we're gonna have to fiddle with some of the power controls on the PlayStation and see if we can't fix that. But yeah, you know, look, we're trying to keep fans connected with the team and in any small way. And I know just a simulated game doesn't cut the mustard, but if it's something that, you know, that 2.5-minute recap that we do and throw a few hammy calls in there and, you know, have some fun with it. Hopefully that just keeps people connected. And my goodness, the views surprised the heck out of me. We have got, 60,000 on Instagram one day, which is mind-boggling to me, but it's awesome. We still have our Tribe Talk program going once a week on the radio side, and that's been an opportunity to visit with some of the players and find out what they've been doing, and it's been, a lot of fun. We have more time to kind of take a deeper dive into things, so that show's still going, and we're just, everybody in the communications department is trying to find ways to keep people connected so that when we do get back, we can kind of hit the ground running, and hopefully we do get back at some point.
Rosey, certainly when we, especially in Northeast Ohio or throughout Ohio, and we go through winters and February comes and everybody goes out to Arizona or Florida, spring training starts, it's kind of that new rebirth, and we're all looking forward to it, and then the plug was pulled, and certainly it was disappointing for us as fans, and not only in Major League Baseball, but NBA, NHL, just live sports in general. But what was kind of the reaction that you heard from the Indians players when the plug was pulled? Obviously disappointment, but anything surprise you in the feedback that you got from them?
Not really. I mean, especially because of the timing of it. We actually, I mean, I know March 12th sounds early yet, but remember, we were scheduled to open on March the 26th.
Right.
So there wasn't much more than a week to go in spring training. And actually just talked to Shane Bieber a little while ago before you guys called. And he was saying he had one, maybe two more starts in the spring to get ready for opening day. And he was rolling. He had all 5 pitches working. He felt great. So for them, I think that's where the disappointment lies. They totally get it. I mean, they're fully supportive of the shutdown and, the stay at home and all that kind of stuff that's associated with this. But from an athletic and performance standpoint, they were ready to go. I mean, it was that point of spring training where you were just kind of fine tuning things if you were healthy. And then for the other guys trying to come back, they were just trying to get there as quickly as they could. So I think there was major disappointment because they were so close to being ready to start a season.
I guess going off of that question and players getting ready to go, players like Clevenger and Carrasco trying to get healthy and heal up from those injuries. So in retrospect, that helps there. But at the same time, what are players that you're hearing, what are they doing now to continue to stay ready for when this does start up again? Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a ramp-up period to get started, but what are you hearing as far as that?
It really does vary from player to player. Now, Shane Bieber was saying he's staying with a college buddy who's actually in the Indians farm system at AAA. And so there's someone to play catch with. On the other side of the coin, Adam Pletko was in a spot where, he wasn't allowed really to play catch with anybody because that violates the social distancing rules and all that kind of stuff. So he would just take a bucket of balls, and he has a sort of a mound in his backyard, and he would set up a net and just throw into that net at 60 feet 6 inches to try and simulate throwing to a catcher. But so it really does kind of run the gamut in terms of what players are doing. Some of them are getting as creative as they can to try and stay sharp. And I think what the pitchers are doing as a group, and they've met with Carl Willis and the other pitching staff, the pitching coaches on the staff, to try and figure out the best way to be ready to go. They say they work best when they have a goal. And what they've done is, even though there's been nothing announced, they've just set June 1st as a jumping off point to really have something to shoot for. And if for some reason we're not playing on June 1st, it's pushed back even further, which probably is likely, at least they can get there and then adjust from there, because you would figure at that point you might have a little more clarity on if there's a season and then when that season would start.
We're visiting with Indians radio play-by-play host Jim Rosenhaus, and again, appreciate your time. Rosey, kind of a nice segue from that comment. We've heard Major League Baseball come back, and there's been all kinds of ideas tossed out as to what it might look like. We've talked about an Arizona league and a Florida league, the players being sequestered in hotels after the game. They wouldn't be in the dugout. They'd be sitting in the stands with no fans. Do you think that's plausible? And would the athletes, would they go for that, or do they have a completely different mindset and saying it has to be this way or we're not going to play?
Well, I think they want to have a season. Would it be different? Would it be challenging on a lot of levels if it was that Arizona plan where they'd be kind of in a bubble, so to speak, all 30 teams? Yes. Here's the thing, though, Mike. I think it's going to be real interesting to see how this week goes here in Ohio, because they're going to try and open a little bit and to see what that means. Other states are opening now. So it's going to, I think as a week goes by, we might get a little bit better idea of what that looks like. And maybe it means that they don't have to all go to Arizona. There may be parts of this country that are okay to play baseball. I've heard Minnesota is one of the earlier states to open. Texas is trying to get open. So maybe you see a little bit different look where there's more locations where teams could play. Now, do I think we'll, even by the end of the season, do I think we'll ever get to New York or Seattle or even Detroit? Sounds like they've really had their struggles. I think that would be a stretch. But there's some other areas, and I think Ohio's included in that, where they got ahead of it and they've done a really, really good job. That maybe it is safe to play games here. Now, whether that's with fans or not, I don't know. But maybe it would be safe to play games here, and then they can figure it out from there.
So switching off of that, Jim, and you started with the Indians in 2007, and you have a different preparation for the fourth and fifth innings, which are your main broadcast points during the game, compared to Tom Hamilton, who starts the game and finishes the game. Is there a different way that you prepare?
Well, I think for those early innings and later innings, when I'm not doing play-by-play, I actually have to work harder to try and find some good stuff to complement what Tom's going with. So, yeah, it is a little bit different. And I think it comes into play on those games where he has vacation time and misses some games, and I would do, the bulk of the play-by-play during those games. So it is a little bit different, but it's fun just the same. I mean, I think your preparation is very similar. You go downstairs to the clubhouses and you try and talk to as many guys as you can to find out what's going on that day, or maybe just in that particular stretch of play for a player or a pitcher, and get as much insight as you can from all those guys. So that stuff doesn't change.
Jim, you got a chance at spring training to start to look at the guys, kind of see what this team was made of this year. We knew the pitching staff was going to be strong with Bieber coming back, Carrasco coming back, and some other guys getting healthy. And we had Frankie at shortstop. And when you look at the whole mix of the group and the people that they brought in the offseason and the core group that was still left behind, of course, we lose Jason Kipnis. But early on, what was kind of your thought on how this team was going to mesh and where they would actually kind of fall into the American League Central?
Well, I still love the starting rotation. And with Clevenger healthy now, he's past the knee issue that he had in spring training. When you can roll out a Shane Bieber, Mike Clevenger, Carlos Carrasco, and then follow that up with a Zach Plesac and Adam Pletko and Aaron Savali, one of those guys wasn't going to be in the rotation, which means it's a pretty good rotation, I think. So love the rotation. The lineup on the infield, tremendous. When you look around with Carlos Santana at first, Lindor and Ramirez on the left side of the infield, and Cesar Hernandez looked really good, the new second baseman who they acquired from the Phillies. I thought looked really good, and Roberto Perez was rounding the shape nicely. I know there are some question marks in the outfield, but Franmil Reyes is going to hit and hit a lot in terms of home runs. I think Oscar Mercado is a young player that bears watching after a really good rookie season. And then there were some, mix and match type pieces like a Delino DeShields and a Jordan Luplo and others. So I'm sure I'm forgetting, but I think they'd be fine in the outfield. My concern really was, how would the bullpen take shape? And the only reason I mention that is because we really were kind of saying the same thing a year ago, and the bullpen ended up having a really good year. It was all said and done. So, maybe the names aren't household names, so to speak, but Terry Francona is a master at getting the most out of each of his bullpen pitchers and putting them in roles where they can succeed. So I think it would have come around just fine. So, the team was really looking good. And just talking to players, over the last couple of weeks, I think that's another area where they're really disappointed because they feel they have a really good team. And you don't always head into seasons where you really think you have a shot to win it all. And I think this group thinks they do. So they're really hoping to play.
Yeah.
So looking off of that, fans obviously want Lindor to sign a long-term contract. Do you think with this season delayed a little bit, is that kind of the fans where they think that they're going to have a little less time of Lindor now if he does indeed sign with another team within the next couple of years?
Well, it's going to be interesting because what's happening now is impacting every team in Major League Baseball significantly from a financial standpoint. And it's going to be interesting to see what teams do regarding high-priced talent. And Lindor will be that. He already is based on what he makes through arbitration. So, look, at this point, I'm sure it's conversations that are had on the baseball side of things for the Indians. But until we start playing games and they see what that looks like, it's probably something that they can put on the back burner. But it's going to be real interesting, not just to see what the Indians do, but other teams do in terms of keeping some of their talent and acquiring talent that may be unexpectedly available because of the impact of the coronavirus and not starting the season on time and losing some games.
Rosey, you think in your heart of hearts that Frankie wants to stay in Cleveland?
Yeah, but I do, but it's got to be at the right price for him, and I don't think he wants to be shortchanged, and that's fair. And I think the Indians are aware of that. Look, they could have put an offer out there under what his market value was before the virus. Who knows what it's going to be after the virus is complete, but they could have put a number out there and said, hey, we offered him this, and he turned it down. But they don't want to make him look bad by doing that or insult him with a lowball offer. So they're trying to work toward it, and he'd love to stay here. This is the organization he grew up in. I thought the way he handled the All-Star game last year in terms of being an ambassador for the city was tremendous. But he's at the prime of his career. He's a once-in-a-lifetime talent, and more power to him if he wants to go out and get what he feels he's worth. And whether that matches up with the Indians remains to be seen. It'll be a challenge, to be sure.
So going off of finances, I guess, how big of a financial impact is this on the Cleveland Indians as the rest of Major League Baseball as well?
But I think that's the key, Jared. I mean, you can say it's an impact on the Indians, but it's all 30 teams in baseball. There's not a team in baseball that's escaping the financial impact, and it will be significant. And it's going to change how baseball does business. We've already seen it. The draft has been shortened to just 5 rounds. There could be significant changes coming to player development and the minor league systems. So you're seeing that already, and the Indians are right in there with everybody else. Obviously, some teams have less wiggle room to work with because of market size and some of the revenue streams that some markets have as opposed to others. But each of the 30 teams is really feeling it right now, and I think that's why they're turning over every stone to try and see what they can get done in terms of a season.
You know, especially early in the season, the Indians have sometimes struggled at the gate during the weeknights. It's still cold out, kids are in school, so on and so forth. They've always done well with their TV viewership. Radio is through the roof. We love listening to you and Tom Hamilton. And I know I do particularly. But let's assume things got back to normal. Do you see that because people have been inside so much that they would come out and more than we've ever seen it before just because they've missed it so much?
Well, I think those are great points, Mike. And look, we could say they are able to play here, and it is open to fans. I think the demand would be tremendous because people would want to go to the games, and the weather would be nice at the start of the season, right. You would think. But look, the overriding factor is, though, I think a lot of fans will be concerned with how close do I want to sit next to someone I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it's going to come down to. You know, how safe do they feel from a health standpoint? Where do we stand with the virus? And even if ballparks are opened up, will they be available to full capacity, or will there be separation involved where you might have to decrease capacity significantly? It's going to be really fascinating to see, because I don't think it's going to be just, open it up and 30,000 people show up. I don't think that's going to happen. Not because they don't want to, but I think there'll be some caution because of the virus and whether it would come back or not.
Sure.
I'd say that's almost a good segue into the next question, I guess, is how they do this coming back is, do they maybe go every other row, create a one way to go out of the aisles and out of the stadium in general? I guess, are those certain logistics that teams are actually thinking about currently?
I'm going to guess teams are thinking about that. And again, I'm sure they're not leaving any idea unthought about. So, I don't know what the answer is if you do it every other row, but if it's a group of four, do you put 2 seats between the next group of four, or how it all works? And obviously with the amount of season ticket holders, they would have probably have to be moved in some cases. So there's a lot to look at, and it'll be interesting. But I know you talked about that Arizona plan earlier, and that may be what happens. But if they could play in their home park with some amount of fans, I think that would be just a huge, huge boost in a lot of ways. Players, fans, staff, and a city too, where they could do that.
And we're visiting with Indians play-by-play on the radio broadcast, Jim Rosenhaus. And Jim, I got to ask this question: as you were out in Arizona talking to people in baseball, and there's a lot of creative people in baseball from the marketing standpoint, had you heard any inklings that anybody was going to do a mini trash can night when the Houston Astros came into town?
I think a minor league team already had that on the docket. I think the team in Staten Island, New York, it was already on their promotional list. So
was it really?
I think it's easy for a minor league team to do that because they don't have to play the Astros. I think if the Astros came in and the Indians did that, that could create probably a sticky situation on the field for players from both teams. Who knows? I don't know. But minor league team took the plunge, and I'm sure you'll see some others if we do get back to play.
Was there a lot of talk about it at spring training, or did the players just leave it alone and didn't really?
There was a lot of talk. Absolutely a lot of talk. At the time, coronavirus wasn't a big topic of conversation, so it absolutely was. Now, being in Arizona, the Astros train in Florida, and you'd be surprised that you're in that news cycle with the other 15 teams in the Cactus League, and you keep tabs on the Florida stuff, but if a team is in Florida, it's, you just don't hear as much about them, and you certainly obviously don't play them, so there's nothing going on at your ballpark. But still, it was for players. We had a couple of guys in our clubhouse who had been with Houston, and so it was a topic of conversation for them. But it was interesting because I think the way Houston handled it was terrible. Both front office wise and player wise, in terms of how they addressed it after the penalties were put down. But what are you going to do? I think they kind of caught a break here because of the delay in the start of the season. I think if the season had started on time, everything had been normal, it would have been a rough season for Houston.
Do you think, going off of that with the Houston Astros and their scandal, and then you have players on their team like a Michael Brantley, like a Joe Smith, have any of the Indians players reached out to them and said, hey, we're with you during this? You're not the one that was part of this scandal, but you're somewhat taking the brunt of it when you're the visiting team going somewhere. Is that something that the Indians players have talked about at all?
You know what? I'm not sure. I mean, I know a lot of our players are still real close with Michael Brantley and to some extent Joe Smith, but and I'm sure they've talked about what happened and involvement and all that kind of stuff. But outside of that, I don't know any specifics.
Jim, as Indians fans, and we listen to the radio, whether we're out mowing the yard or it might be a West Coast game and we're listening to it as we go to bed. And the voice of Tom Hamilton is so iconic in Indians history. What is it like to work with him, and what are maybe a couple key things that you've really learned from him?
You know what? It's a ball. It really is, because you know, he doesn't miss a call in a big spot. So you always get the, you know, real good account of what happened with some emotion. But I think the fun part is just, you know, he doesn't hold much back, and
Right.
is willing to speak his mind, and that's fun. It keeps it fun. I think that's what people like about him. You know, from my perspective, I think uh, just how he goes about his work each day. Um, Whether the Indians are in it or not, obviously we're on a good run here for many, many years where they've been in contention. But whether, you know, it's a meaningful game or a game that, you know, a Wednesday afternoon in June and maybe the team's struggling or whatever, he still prepares as hard now, I think, as he ever has. And that's certainly a real easy thing to latch on to and try and aspire to. But I think just in general, it's fun to work with them. We're friends. We see each other in the off season, and so that part of it is just fun to talk baseball with someone that you're friends with, and we just happen to get to do it on the radio.
Going off of that, and it's not like you came into the Indians organization with no experience. You spent a ton of time broadcasting for the former affiliate, the Chipotle Buffalo Bisons. I think you almost hold a record in your 11 seasons there, and then you're a part of their Hall of Fame as well. And just what did that experience mean to you to get you ready to broadcast for the Indians?
It was tremendous. And, you know, I think Buffalo, they have AAA baseball, but it's a major league city, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The fact they have the Bills and the Sabres, and their ballpark was built with the idea at the time that they would get a major league team. When they built that ballpark in the late 80s, there were 2 expansion teams that were coming within a 5-year period, and they built it with the idea that they could expand it and give a run at Major League Baseball. And bear in mind, at that time, their AAA team was drawing more than 1 million fans a year, which was highly uncommon. So there was still that feeling that, you know, it meant a lot. And it was a good situation to be in, and to be there as long as I was. Certainly it gave you an opportunity to learn from coaches, players, all that kind of stuff, and work at your craft in a real good situation. So I'm always thankful for that.
Jim, my last question, you get to go to a lot of different places. Obviously, the American League, you get to visit at least once a year, and sometimes some National League ones. What's your favorite park and why?
Gosh, there's so many. I mean, I always tell people every major league park's a good one, and that includes, like, people just can't stand Oakland because it's an old rundown football stadium. I love it. I think the fans there are hilarious, and it kind of, you know, it's that old school, no frills. They get the job done, all that kind of stuff. But as far as nice places to go, I always enjoy going to Seattle because it's kind of a cool ballpark where the roof can open and close. It's a great booth to work in. And the city is so different from anything I'm used to, being from in the Midwest here. So Seattle's always a fun one. City-wise, always love going to Chicago. Thankful that we're in the same division, so we go there a lot. Just a great city to visit.
And then I guess my last question, you've had so many iconic moments happen here within the last few years, and I might be stealing this question from Mike, but he did say it was
okay.
A question. Your favorite Cleveland Indians memory from 2007 to present?
Can I do 2?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and the reason I say that, the easy one is the Rajai Davis home run in Game 7 of the 2016 World Series. Just, I mean, it's a Game 7,
Yeah.
and it was just out of nowhere, and the reaction in this ballpark was crazy. But a close second, the final night of the 22-game win streak in 2017. It was just a crazy 3 weeks. I mean, nobody doesn't lose for 3 weeks in baseball, and that's what the Indians did. There were 7 shutouts during that time. None of the games were close. I think there was 1 or 2 maybe that were one-run games. Well, that one, They were losing in the bottom of the ninth. Lindor doubles to bring home the tying run. And then when Jay Bruce doubled in the 10th inning to win it, I mean, that ballpark was as loud as I've ever heard it, including the Davis home run, probably louder that night. But it was a close second that the night they extended the win streak to 22 and turned out to be the final night. It was just, it was really neat. So two there for you.
Very good. Well, Jim, you've been so gracious with your time, and I certainly appreciate you coming on and sharing thoughts. I certainly hope that we do get the season started in some normal semblance. We'll just have to see how things go. But you do a great job. We're certainly glad to listen to you and Tom Hamilton. You bring to life the whole game of baseball for the Indians, and we certainly appreciate you coming on with us.
Mike, Jared, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I do want to remind our viewers that the comments and views expressed in this podcast series are those of Mike Sparks, Jared Moore, and our guest. The podcast is not associated in any way with WBCO and WQEL Radio. We'll continue this podcast series as we move along. And Jim Rosenhaus from the Indians, again, thank you. Certainly appreciate it. And Jared, anything else for the good of the cause?
Nope, just thanks, Jim, for coming on. And obviously we miss baseball, and this just helps us get that fix in just a little bit, even if we don't have to watch Tom Hamilton call Lindor's grand slam against the Yankees in Game 2 in 2017 20 times a day. So this gets it going a little bit. So thanks for joining us.
Anything to help.
We'll put a close to this initial episode of Overtime Podcast. And as always, a spirit with a vision is a dream with a mission. Have a good night, everybody.